Today's show is sponsored by our friends at distilleryproducts.com. I could talk about this forever. You already know the drill. If you need awesome laser etch glassware at wholesale prices and you are a bourbon group, you are a store, you're a distillery, you got to talk to the folks at distilleryproducts.com. Reach out to me. I would be happy to get you in touch with them. They have amazing prices and do amazing work at distilleryproducts.com. Today's show is also sponsored by our friends at Orca Coolers. Make this summer the coolest summer ever with Orca. They have something for everyone, from American-made, lifetime guaranteed hardside coolers to stainless steel whiskey barrel tumblers. They're ready to have your name on it. I got a hard cooler, a soft cooler. I got a few of these whiskey barrel tumblers. I'm getting ready to make my barbecues awesome. Use code DADS20 for 20% off of your order at Orca Coolers. That is code DADS20, and you're going to get 20% off, and that actually means something pretty substantial when you go to get a new cooler. So check them out, orcacoolers.com. Use code DADS20 for 20% off. Today's show is also sponsored by our friends at action247.com. You want action? Get in on the action at action247.com, the only sports book by Tennesseans for Tennesseans, and it is the NHL playoffs. The Preds are playing against the Carolina Hurricanes. So for every Preds playoff games, if the Preds win, you win. Bet $5 on the game, and you'll get a $10 free bet for every goal the Preds win by. So if they win by 4-1, you're going to get a $30 free bet. The Grizzlies are also in the playoffs. NBA playoffs are going on. Bet $5 on the Grizzlies. If they win, you get your winnings plus a $12 free bet. And of course, if you use code DADS100, they are going to match up to $400 of your deposit. Check out all the boosts they have. Visit the special section of their sportsbook at action247.com. Hello, everyone. My name is John Edwards, and with me, as always, is Zeke Baker, and together we make the Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, thank you for making us a part of your day. Zeke, you almost didn't make it here tonight. You kept our guests waiting for 25 minutes. I can't believe you did that.
I mean, I'm at least 70% responsible here, but at least the other 30, probably 35 to 40, I'm going to blame on these two 20-something-year-old ignorant people that out of 12 parking spots at the storage unit decided to park in the one that was right next to me, and we got there, all other 12 were empty. Why do you park right next to somebody? Why do you park right on top of the line where they can't even open their damn car door to put a box in it? Then you have to look at them like they're remedial.
Tell me how you really feel.
Don't sound better. If I told you how I really felt, it would just be a lot of bleeps. So we'll save that for people for now and try to mellow back out a little bit. But I'm less than thrilled about these two people. If I knew their names, or I got their tag number, or possibly knew where they lived, they might wake up to a present on their doorstep in the morning. That's all I'll say.
I don't want anyone to think that we're not excited about the two people that are on the show. You keep saying two people, and we have two guests that are on the show tonight. Like, I want everybody to know that we have Stu and Martin from Bespoken Spirits on. We're going to introduce them in a second. We are very excited about these two people. Zeke is not excited about two people that parked very close to him at the storage unit.
If I ever see them again, they're going to know about it. That's all I'll say.
I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you're here. Let's get right to it. We have kept these two gentlemen waiting, and they were forced to talk to me, Zeke. So you know how bad that was. Not only were you late, but you put me on them. I feel bad because I know I don't shut up. And
yeah, I mean, that's on the top 5 list of things I would not wish upon my worst enemy.
Well, let's get to them.
Thanks.
Because they are doing something that is pretty crazy. So we have Martin Yanisek and Stu Aaron from Bespoken Spirits. This is a pretty interesting thing, Zeke. They founded Bespoken Spirits on the premise that a spirit's color, aroma, and most importantly, taste could be designed, engineered, and precisely controlled with modern science, technology, and data. So rather than putting the spirit in a barrel and waiting passively for nature to take its course, Bespoke instills the barrel in the spirit, actively controlling the process, and deliver premium quality spirits in days rather than years. Pretty amazing premise. I could tell, I was talking to them beforehand. I know they both worked in IT because they use customization as a service. Or is it, did I get that right, guys?
You got it right.
Yeah.
That and maturation as a service.
Oh, there's mass too. There's Cass and mass.
You got it.
Yes.
I like it. So we have Stu and Martin from Bespoken Spirits. We might as well get right to you. How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Fantastic. Thank you for having us tonight.
Doing great. Always enjoying meeting fellows and learning from people from the industry. Because as you're going to hear, Stu and myself, we're pretty new to this industry, not in the drinking part, and definitely in the making part.
Well, so are we. So don't worry. We're just newbies. And I always tell everyone we're the only thing that separates us from anybody that is a bourbon drinker is that we were stupid enough to buy equipment, and I was stupid enough to waste a lot of my time editing audio. So that is the only thing that separates us from anyone else that drinks. And we just are curious to talk to people like you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What did you do before this, and what got you into whiskey? And we'll start with Martin because this was your brainchild. And then Stu, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you brought to the table here. But Martin.
Thanks, John. Yeah. So my background is got a PhD in material science in Europe. Came to Silicon Valley about 16 years ago. And the idea really came doing a wine and whiskey club out of a discussion. And of course, we were primarily, we call them here nerds, right? Engineers, right? Sitting together and kind of starting talking about aging and having to wait, like in case of wine, where people tell you if you buy a Bordeaux wine, you have to wait 10, probably more like 20, 25 years. Right. And quickly that switched over to whiskeys. Right. And why does a whiskey that is 15 years old cost twice the price than the one that costs 12 years old? And then somebody asked, what is actually happening during the maturation process of whiskey? Why does it actually take so long? And that kind of made me wonder and started reading some literature. There was a group actually in Spain that were working on, in Portugal. They were working on brandies, and they claimed that they could make a brandy within a couple of months that people weren't able to differentiate, and then at least organoleptically in a tasting, right, from something that was much, much older. So that kind of kicked the idea, right? And for me as an engineer, was primarily motivated here about what we call the learning cycles, right? If you can learn faster than your competitor, than the existing industry, and even if it's just by a factor of 2, right, you have a great advantage. And the idea here that if what some of the literature was suggesting, right, that you could learn much faster than what the current practices were, right, you would be able to generate a lot of data. You could you could try a lot of different recipes, a lot of different approaches, and you could kind of transfer this from what I call an experience-driven to a knowledge-driven industry. So that's sort of how it started.
And then how did Stu get involved? And Stu, tell us a little bit about you and what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, so Martin and I actually have known each other for a long time. We first met 15 years ago when we worked together and launched another sustainably focused company, which was a fuel cell company called Bloom Energy. And at Bloom, Martin ran the hardcore technology development, and I ran the marketing and the business development. And you can kind of guess from that and from the introduction that Martin gave you that he's the material scientist by training, and he's a foodie, and beverage guy from a passion perspective. Whereas I'm admittedly neither of those things. I'm the business guy, and I've got more the everyman's palate. So we complement ourselves both on the skills and on the palate perspective and how we've kind of approached the market. And so, what's interesting is that when Martin first approached me with the idea behind the company, I have to admit I didn't really understand the science at first, but there were several things that hooked me on the idea as an entrepreneur. It met the criteria of the four things that I always think, make for a great business opportunity: a massive market to address, trend lines that make that market ripe for change and disruption, a differentiated and a defensible technology with which to drive change, and last but certainly not least, a mission like sustainability to make it worthwhile as a passion project and not just an interesting business opportunity. And I saw all those things in Bespoken from the get-go.
My apologies, because I know Martin is the guy who is the PhD who is actually making all of this stuff work, and Stu is the guy who's out there selling it for everyone. It's kind of what, to boil that down into the simplistic version of this. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's the simplistic way to describe it.
I have a lot of questions. I know Zeke is going to have some questions too. I know we are going to taste through this. I do want to know more about the process as to how this works. I know some of that's proprietary, so I know Martin can't go in all the way to that, but I do have one question. This is more for Stu, and it's just, I think business, the first thing I'm thinking about is levers. When levers get pulled, I think about ROI. I think about pricing. I mean, that's the way my brain works. I work in business. Yes, I'm in IT as well, but like, that's the way Zeke will tell you, that's the way that I go always. So if pricing for other spirits is usually determined by age has a lot to do with being able to raise the price on bourbon and especially scotch and things like that. How does Bespoken then position itself in a way? Because if we know that this is taking days, not years, how do you then determine what the baseline for pricing is?
That's a great question, John. And the short answer is we tie it to quality. One of the things that you have to do when you introduce a brand like ours, and you base the brand on the technology that we use and the distinction of how we blend tradition and technology together, is you have to prove that you can do something that's of quality. And the way we've done that is, we've taken the product to competitions where it would be blindly judged against well-known brands and much older products. And the Bespoken products have done phenomenally well. And in just the last 18 months, our first 18 months of eligibility, we entered, I think it's 8 prestigious competitions, including the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, the New York Wine and Spirits Competition, the World Whiskeys Awards. And we've taken home 44 medals in multiple categories against well-known brands and against much older products. So it's that benchmark of quality that we've used to kind of, build confidence and build a following and establish the premium nature of our product.
I think spirits competitions are interesting, and they're very contested within the whiskey community for a whole number of reasons. But do you think it's hard to defend, because even with aging, you would have taxes, right? So you got to pay the government taxes on the whiskey as it ages every year. There's things that you can put on paper that say this is why it costs X, Y, and Z. Your margins have to be, not to just come out of the gate swinging and have a serious question here, but like your margins have to be pretty ridiculous if this is something that you're not paying for storage. You can get some whiskey because you're not getting a barrel. Do what you got to do to it, get it out in days. It's almost like moonshine. As a company, not only do you not have a lot of overhead because you don't have to store that, your speed to market is quicker. You're actually getting revenue quicker. You're not sitting on, there's a whole lot of distillery owners that will say their assets are actually liquid, but you all are getting that done and getting that out quickly. Do you think there is a cap?
I think the first thing to realize, John, is you're right to latch on to the economic advantages that we bring to the industry. And that's why, half of our business or more is actually providing services behind the scenes, like an Intel Inside model, to existing distillers, rectifiers, and retailers of various shapes, sizes, and geographic locations, where we're helping them either mature their young spirit faster to get faster, better, cheaper product and generate revenues faster, or more often than not, we're helping them take product that may have already spent 1, 3, 5, 7 or more years in a barrel And when it came out of the barrel, nature wasn't kind to it, and they're not happy with what they've got and realize they can't sell it to the customers they want at the price points that they want. And we can help them tailor that to exactly what they want it to become. So a lot of the economic value of our model is in doing work behind the scenes to help existing industry players, make their products better and get an economic benefit there. And we're also obviously able to benefit from that ourselves in the Bespoken branded products. But of course, the volume and the size and the stage of Bespoken is not at the high volume, you get the maximum, supply chain benefit stage yet, but it all factors into how we think about the economics. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to price comparatively based on quality, as opposed to just simply looking at it as a margin or as a purely economic exercise.
So the magic behind Bespoken is almost like one of the big four consulting houses. You could use Staffog if you want and actually get our spirit. So if you're thinking from an IT perspective, there's staff augmentation where you're actually going to temporarily hire people to do work for you, which would be like getting your whiskey. At the same time, you can do management consulting and come in, or IT consulting, and build the model for them for how they can then age this whiskey or change the whiskey to something that's more pleasing, quicker, bigger, stronger, faster, all the things that Daft Punk likes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll give you a good example of kind of a case study we've seen a lot of interest in lately with ready-to-drink cocktails, where companies want the spirit in their ready-to-drink cocktail to taste like their older aged premium spirit, but they don't want to waste their older aged premium spirit in the ready-to-drink cocktail. They'd rather sell it at a premium as older aged premium spirit. And so our ability to work with them to take young spirit, make it taste like the premium stuff, use it in the ready-to-drink cocktails, and leave the premium stuff for them to sell as premium stuff has been a real nice value proposition for those customers.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in earlier just because our process kind of takes only a couple of days, right, rather than being in a warehouse for many, many years, right, does not mean that the effort that we are putting in making it, right, is any less, right? You could even argue we start working right when other people start leaning back and kind of waiting for the barrels to do their job, right? And when we develop recipes, we sometimes produce 100 different spirits, right, that have different variations in the toast, in the char, right, in the wood, right, and in the grain structure, all kinds of things, right, where we what we call design and experiment, where we then produce, like I said, hundreds of different whiskeys, and that is an effort, of course, right, that also contributes to part of costs. And as you know, then another piece, of course, of what we pay on the shelf and what the producer gets, right? There's a big difference.
What can you tell us about the process? I mean, I know a lot of it's proprietary. I know you don't want to give up the secret sauce, but how does it work? Kind of give me the 40,000 foot level.
So my background, like I said, when we talked earlier, right, is really material science and process engineering. And we kind of looked at this like a typical engineering problem, right, where you're trying to understand. So the end product is clear, right? The ingredients is also clear, right? We're always starting. We don't distill ourselves. So we always start with a spirit. And as Stu said, sometimes the spirit is already matured. And then another ingredient, right, as you know, is the wood, right? So what one of the very first things we did is we wanted to produce. We wanted to check the box if we can produce something that is reproducible, right? So for something to be reproducible, you need to understand your raw materials, right? With wood, you have the issue that it's a natural product, right? So you have a ton of wood variations. So a lot of our core competency is actually in understanding the contribution of the wood. So we do all the wood treatments, everything in house, and then we marry the spirit with the wood, depending on how we treated it and what we call our activator. And in the activator, we accelerate the reactions that would typically happen in the barrel. We don't use any additives, right, other than the spirit starting spirit, right, and the wood, and then within a couple of days, right, like I said, we're controlling the reactions that are happening, which some of them are extraction reactions out of the wood, other reactions are reactions that are coming from oxidation and then esterification, all kinds of different reactions that are happening, right, and really looking at it from a pure science, engineering, technology background, right, of understanding what is happening, measuring what is happening, right, and then controlling the different processes that are happening in the maturation process. So our company is all about the customization, right? Really understanding what are the big key input variables, right? How do you control them to get to the output that the customer desires?
So are you aging it in a barrel, or are you aging it in a vat and adding staves and things like that?
Yeah. We have like a big, or we have our activator, how we call it, is a stainless steel vessel.
The way to think about what we do is rather than putting the spirit in the barrel, we deconstruct the barrel and we take the elements of the barrel and we put it together with the spirit into the activator. We're using these small pieces of wood that we call microstaves, where each microstave is roughly 1/25,000th the size of a barrel, so maybe half the size of your little finger. And by getting that small, what we get is we get precision, which means that, whereas in a barrel, as Martin said, wood's a naturally occurring element. You get some of what you want, some of what you don't want. You never know the exact ratios. You don't mix and match wood in staves in a barrel because you get leakage because they expand and contract at different rates. By operating at these microstave levels, each microstave brings the elements of the wood that we want and none of the elements that we don't want. And what we do is we make a blend of microstaves for the type of recipe and the type of result that we want. So for one recipe, we might use, let's say, all American oak, whereas for another recipe, we might mix some American oak with some French oak with some cherry, right? And so this ability to choose different types and quantities and combinations and ratios of microstaves, which have been carefully sourced and have been precisely selected and treated, and then to be able to toast and char them with many, many, many levels of granularity instead of the traditional barrel model, which has high, medium, and low, where those things don't really have any precise definitions and they're inconsistent and don't mean anything. We can toast and char at different depths, at different temperatures, and different atmospheres for different durations. And all these different levers between the wood selection and the treatment, along with the source spirit and then the environmental settings on the activator, give us, over 20 billion different combinations that we can use in developing our recipes.
So many questions. I mean, I find this all super, super interesting. Microstaves. I mean, if you do a number 4 char, wouldn't that char go deeper than a microstave? So the whole stave itself is essentially just charred?
Yeah, and so we probably won't do a char for whatever in parentheses this is. Yeah, you get your crocodile skin, right, and then you have to figure out what is really. It's pretty impressive, right, when you ask people, right, what the char does, and is it the red layer that is important, right? What does really the char do, right? Or is it that red layer underneath the char, right? The depth of it, right? How far the heat got actually into the barrel stave, right? Which is about 2 inches thick, right? In a typical barrel. Right. And these are all the things that we have looked at, right? And that we also keep looking at what are really the key parameters, right? When you do those wood treatments, right? And again, I can't underestimate how important it is here that we have these short learning cycles, right? When you say, okay, let's try this, let's do a different char, to use the industry term, right? And do this char with a different temperature of the flame, do it with a different atmosphere, do it at a different humidity, right? All these things. And as you can see, you can very quickly get a really, really impressive metrics of experiments that you want to run, right? And if you want to do this in a traditional barrel aging, right, you will come back 5 or 10 years later, right? And then you'll get some result. And then from those results, you will decide, okay, well, let's do the next experiments, right? Because barrel number 4 and 8 were good, right? And then you come back another 5 or 10 years later, right? In our case, we come back a week later, another week later. So we have this tremendous advantage of learning so quickly. And we do a ton of, haven't really talked about this, but we do a ton of analytical analysis of the spirits before, after, and doing processing, right? To kind of understand the fingerprints of the spirit, to really understand when it goes in and then when it comes out, right? How do our process conditions, how do the different wood treatments, right, impact the chemistry of the spirit? And again, right, we have already made thousands of whiskeys, of bourbons in just a little bit about 2.5 years, probably. With that possibility, you generate a tremendous amount of data that then you can build a model that kind of shows you when you want more vanillin, when you want more isoamyl acetate, right? Whatever it is, right? What are the levels, right, that you need to change in your process?
But you can see the process itself is actually incredibly traditional and pure, in the sense that we're only using the same all-natural elements that go into traditional barrel aging: source spirit, wood, toast, and char. We don't have any additives. We don't have any chemicals. We've really just reimagined the process to extract the most capability in the most precise fashion. And, speed obviously happens to come with it. And it's also worth highlighting, one of the things that a lot of our customer base likes about our products is the sustainability of our approach, meaning that compared to traditional barrel aging, we use 97% less wood, 99% less energy, and at least 20% less water, because we have no angel share to speak of.
One big question I have is, bourbon needs to be aged in new charred white American oak.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to call this bourbon whiskey with the TTB definition, considering the fact that you are not aging it in a white oak barrel?
Yeah. So in case of bourbon, we actually do, and we internally decided to age it at least for 3 months in the barrel, so that we can get the approval from the TTB for our bourbon, and then we do the exposure to the microstaves and to the process, sort of like, we could argue, like Makers 46 is doing it, right, with first producing their bourbon, right, and then hanging some staves into it.
We actually have 3 types of bourbons, right, in our portfolio right now. We've got something we call our original batch, which we can't actually technically call a bourbon. We call that a whiskey made from bourbon mash, because that's only spent a few seconds in a barrel before we did our process to it. Then we have our bourbon, which actually spent 3 months in a barrel before we did our process to it, that we can call a bourbon according to the TTB. And then we have a straight bourbon, which spent, 24 months?
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years in the barrel before we did our processing to it. And so we're not adding any age to the process, but depending on what we start with, we can still take it in very tailored and powerful directions to create something better from it and meet the minimum criteria to call it what we want to call it.
So one thing that I find super interesting with all this, I mean, if you think about, and you said it, Martin, the whole Maker's Mark private select process, it is super fun to select Maker's private select. You get all those staves, you're figuring out different combinations of them, how many you're going to use of each one. Zeke hates the P2 stave, but that's a whole other story. I feel like the application right now, there's J. Mattingly, which is a distillery where you can kind of go make your own blend. I think there are distilleries that are starting to allow folks not just to do a barrel pick, but actually do a blending pick. I feel like Bespoken would have a lot of application for whiskey groups and stores that want to come make their own blend, pick all the different staves that are going in there. And it's a process that you could actually have it to your store or to your group pretty quickly and have an interactive process.
Yes.
I have a feeling, knowing you two as long as I have, I've known you for 54 minutes, but I feel like there's going to be a portal. Users are going to be able to go in and make their selections, and then you might send them samples after being in a portal. Because rather than having a whole distillery experience, I really see the Silicon Valley influence here and kind of being able to do things virtually.
Yeah, and John, you just hit on exactly what customization as a service is, right? It's working with, an individual or a celebrity or a corporation or a bar or a restaurant that wants to create something custom, or a whiskey club that wants to create something custom. And we go through this process where we take their input, we produce some samples, they taste the samples, pick what they like, or maybe give us feedback amongst the samples to create another batch of samples, ultimately honing in on what they want, and then we can take that to production. And again, this speed in this process allows us to do all of these things and create all these different variants to hone in on exactly what the customer wants in a reasonable time frame at a reasonable cost. And that's what, really makes cask so exciting.
Zeke, you got anything you want to?
I think Zeke's been drinking, tasting. I'd love to hear your feedback. Yeah,
I have. I've been tasting through these as well as taking some notes and whatnot. I think the first and most obvious question would just be, so who is the big fan of Jurassic Park?
Which one? First one, me.
Yeah, definitely the first one, but I'm sure you get that all the time as well, so apologies. It was just too easy. Like, all right, somebody here really took Jurassic Park and then had some whiskey one night, and then their gears got to spinning, and so how many ever days later, it was like, Eureka, we're doing this.
You saying they're making this whiskey?
I want to talk to my wife about this, yeah, because she thought I was trying to poison her for many, many months. Because, like many women, she has a really, really good palate.
I could imagine the learning curve might have been a little bit of
oh my God,
interesting to say the least for the first few batches that came out. If you own any dogs or cats, they may have ran away as well when you came out of the basement or whatnot and had a glass in the hand.
So some of the feedback, like dog food and rubber tires, and on a hot summer day, yeah, I've heard all these from my wife early on.
Without jumping ahead of anything, because like John mentioned, we do have some samples here, and I have kind of worked through those very simply and going through all of them. I'm impressed, to say the very, very least, and almost at a loss for words, kind of blown away from what I can understand you guys have been able to achieve and do here, and tasting the various final products here. I think, like most anything new or naive, we all kind of form an opinion in our minds, whether that's the wrong or right way to approach something. Anything I had expected or anticipated, I have been proved wrong on, and I'm happy to report that. And this is a pretty solid lineup, to say the least. I'm impressed again. Kudos and cheers. I would not have expected that by any means.
And Zeke, I've been drinking through them as well. I have to agree. I'm very impressed. I think it's tough for the neat drinker. I would throw that, just because I think staves, there's always, just like Martin's wife said, there's a little bit of sweetness that can sometimes come through artificial. It's not that bad. But I think if you put a neat pour of something that's been aged in the barrel for 10 years and been through all sorts of weather, you could just tell it's a little different. And I'm just being honest with that. But I don't think it's enough that I'm calling it out and saying, like, I'm super impressed. I can't say it enough. Like, I thought I was going to come in and it was all going to taste super artificial. The rum is my favorite. I'll be completely honest. And I'm a bourbon. I like rum. The rum is my favorite here. The bourbon is probably my second favorite. Super, super impressed.
What actually surprises a lot of people and really shows off the power of the technology in a nutshell is the original batch, which is the black labeled one you've got, and the special batch, which is the gray labeled one that you've got, the one you just mentioned, John, that's very light. Those products could not be more different, right? The original batch is a bourbon style, right? It's dark, it's vanilla, it's caramel, it's woody. The special batch is a Japanese style whiskey, right? It's light, it's floral, it's fruity. Those two products actually come from the exact same source spirit. So the only difference between those two products is a different recipe, meaning the microstave mixture and treatment, and then 3 days in our machine with the activator settings for temperature, pressure, and other elements being varied. And it just shows the power that we could take this one source spirit into these very diverse directions with the technology.
Anybody who's worked in IT or has been near San Francisco, and you're thinking about what is something that's scalable and repeatable and predictable. So you have predictive analytics here of cost. You have predictive analytics of what the end result is going to be. You have all this data that you're able to bring where, yes, did I say that it's a little bit different from something that's in a barrel if you're drinking it neat? 100%. But at the same time, you have no idea how that whiskey is going to end up in 10 years. And y'all can do something that is predictable and say, this is what your yield is going to be. This is what your taste profile is going to be. This is what it's going to end up as. And I think that is extremely powerful. Sorry, I just rambled and you were like, yeah. Sounds good. Keep talking.
No, this is the good kind of rambling.
Yeah, one of the notes I'd put down was, kind of your OP accounts. Probably more so, I would say, in, restaurants and in the cocktail space than like a well at a bar, just because I think so many people by default, order a Makers and Coke or a Jack and Coke, in more of like a craft cocktail scene or things of that nature, whereas you're kind of limited by whatever spirit or spirits you choose, and then sculpting your final mixture around that. Someone could easily take one of these products, make whatever, old fashioned or whatever standard cocktail they're looking to do, but note there's also an element missing. And I feel like you probably reach out to you guys and say, hey, can we add, a hint of this or kick this up a little bit or just incorporate this element so that when I make this cocktail the same way I would otherwise, I now have a new extra flavor or a twist on the profile that's going to set my product apart from the other 3 restaurants that are across the street from me or, similar location, et cetera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about the mash bill itself? What are you using for your grains? Is it a typical 3-grain mash bill?
Yeah, so John, what I mentioned earlier and probably wasn't clear is that we typically we do not distill ourselves. We always work with a distillery, right? And you, for instance, mentioned the rum, right? We were kind of scouting the market for a rum that we liked, and we found this wonderful distillery down in Southern California who got the sugar canes, right, from the U.S. Virgin Islands, right? And they did the fermentation, right? And they did the distillation, but they didn't have an aged product, right? So once we tasted their spirits, we started purchasing spirits from them, and to make the matured rum that you seem to have liked a lot. And this is true for all of our other spirits. So we always source the starting spirits for our own brand, and then for the customers, whether that's the mass customers with distilleries or rectifiers, right? They typically come with an existing spirit that they already have. And as Stu said earlier, right, it can be a white spirit, but more often than we originally thought, right, they come to us with a product after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and they have the problem that you mentioned earlier, right? They, depending on how long they've been in the business, right, they didn't really know how it's going to taste after 4 years. We worked with somebody who was making brandy, and he said, well, I probably have to wait another 5 years, right? And hopefully it will be better in 5 years. But they don't know this was their first brandy line. And so we always start with the spirit that we either source or that our customers bring to the table.
So is that something that you are thinking about portability with your product? I mean, could we imagine a Bespoken Spirits bus parked outside, or a big trailer, right? And it's like you go from distillery to distillery, and you have the activator in the trailer, and then it's like, all right, roll your barrels out here. We're going to fix it for you right on the spot.
Now I'm worried, John, that you're in IT. You somehow have access to all of our good ideas here. No, totally. So we're working on mobile units, right? Because shipping in some cases, right, plays a big role. We also believe that internationally, the business is very interesting, right? We got extremely warm reception from the Asian market for our spirits. We have distribution, for instance, in Korea, and we're looking at partnerships, right, all over the world, right, to kind of produce the spirit locally to avoid, right, all the issues with transportation that comes also from an environmental point of view, and then also the whole taxation, right? There are states where it's just, or countries, right, 900%, right, tax on spirit that you import, right? It's ridiculous.
Not only am I excited that, it's far better than I thought. And I say that with peace and love. I'm not, when somebody says artificially, aging a spirit, you first go, what? I think it's pretty obvious that Zeke and I are blown away right now. The second thing I would say, though, as a person who is in IT and has worked for disruptor companies, there is something that is extremely appealing when you see a disruptor that is going to come in and change an industry. I just want to know, like, hit me up on the side, guys. I'm available. I'm here. Know the industry.
Love it.
Come poach me. But I think it's if my boss is listening, don't really poach me. I love my job. But I just think there's, like, you all are primed. I've seen this in other industries when you have a disruptor company that's coming in, and you obviously have been through this before with your other companies.
Thank you, and we'll definitely get back to you for tasting feedback, or we sometimes have with what we call machine versus humans, right, where we sort of have our AI software develop design a spirit, and we have our partners from the industry, they design a spirit, right? We did this, for instance, with a malt whiskey, right, where we had the AI tell us what would be the best recipes, right, based on the learning so far, and then we had a group of industry experts, right, deciding. We gave them the base spirits, right, to start with, the sort of to design their mash bill, right, and then also to design the maturation process to come to something that they love, and so would love to get back to you on that.
Zeke, you know what that means, though? That means we're happy to send you some stuff, but that's a big NO. You failed the interview.
I thought they were directing that at you, though, John.
No,
I was saving mine.
Yeah. I was just lamenting to you that they just denied me. That's all I was saying. Like, it had nothing to do with you. I wasn't crapping on you there. Martin, one question I have here is, like, if you think about the bourbon, I know Zeke has a question, but say like the vanilla is coming through pretty prevalent in the bourbon, which that's what I get when I sip this. It's a high vanilla. Are you able to then say, hey, can you add a little bit more oak flavor to it to balance it out?
Oh yeah. Right. And so the recipe that you are tasting, right, or that we choose for the bourbon, right, was just a favorite of, in this case, it was like a tasting panel out of 6 people, right? That was their favorite, right? But totally, right. And of course, right, as you probably know, right, if you say vanilla, another person might say vanilla, who, where, right? So what we do in addition, right, because you and Zeke, you guys probably have different thresholds for what you consider high and low vanilla. So we actually quantify that, right, in this case on a ppm level, right? If this bourbon has probably somewhere around 60 ppm of vanillin in there, right, which comes out of the wood, right, exclusively, right? And for you, that might be not enough, right? For Zach, that might be too much. Right. So when we do those tastings with the customer, while we get those qualitative feedbacks from the customer, right, we also learn about what their threshold is, right, how they're perceiving it. And of course, everybody is different, but that's why we need the big analytical part here too.
So I'm going to go out on a limb, Zeke. And this is when I'm talking about them like they're not here, but I'm really talking to them so they can hear this. Like when Buffalo Trace and Sazerac put out CYPB that just won world's best whiskey. Doesn't this really sound like Craft Your Perfect Bourbon than that whole experiment?
I was going to say, I had already like kind of hit that level of just like, well, holy shit. Early on, tasting these things and, hearing some of the processes and whatnot. And then with that whole vanilla and the, parts per million, et cetera, I was like, well, got me again. I went to like a whole like extra level of like, well, shit, didn't see that coming. But now I'm just kind of blown away even more. And again, no matter what degree of purist probably anybody is, I'm not necessarily too far on that scale. At the end of the day, if it tastes good, I really don't give a shit about too much else, depending on who's around me or who's asking. I guess I would qualify that with. But like I said, at the end of the day, if it's good, that's really all that anybody can ask for and what matters. And it speaks for itself. I think that's by far and away the best takeaway that I would have for anyone outside of everything else going on or trying to explain the processes and whatnot is like, here, quit asking me all these damn questions. Take a sip and tell me if you like it or not. I mean, that's the easiest, way to just answer a question, I guess, non-verbally, essentially. One question, just before I forget kind of thing is, honestly, don't give me an answer here because it might not even resonate or make any sense, but in a ballpark terminology, I guess, or whatever.
Blink 1 for yes or 2 for no is what he's about to say.
No. It's not like that. how much data collection is going on in a given day, and how often or how many people are having to mine over this and really try and find trends, other points of, I guess, reference or emphasis or importance or whatever that we're making kind of move the needle or rethink things or find something different that you can put in your existing product. I guess. Sorry, I couldn't think of the best way to sculpt that because there was so much going on.
It's actually a great question, right? And probably 5 years ago, when data storage was much more expensive than it is today. But today, everything is on one of those cloud things, right? So I don't even know how much terabytes we have. But every spirit, it depends a little bit on what kind of type of a spirit is. But we collect somewhere 400 to 500 data points on every single sample that we make, and we make a lot of them. We make a lot of them.
Fair enough.
It is a lot of work. It sounds like I always insult when people say we're shortcutting things. No, because it's actually a lot of work to get to that, and what we do, and people work hard in the lab, on the manufacturing floor, everywhere. The data, right? But if we would have tried this 20 years ago, no way. Right, we would have not had the machines, right, to run the software and everything, right? We would have not even had the analytical tools, right, the capabilities that we have today, right? 20 years ago, impossible, right? Absolutely, at least with the funds that we have, right? Impossible.
You hit the nail on the head on. It's not shortcutting. You're doing your homework in order to expedite or to increase the speed to market. I mean, it's using IT principles in the spirits industry that typically, is just starting to really embrace tech. And you're seeing stills kind of get run by computers and things that they weren't able to do before, even cutting the whiskey. There are still people that are making hand cuts to the whiskey for the hearts, heads, and tails. Computers now have it dialed down to they're like, all right, you have to make your cut here. You have to make your cut there. I would not say it's shortcutting at all. I would say if I came across saying any of that in the very beginning or if it seemed like I was saying it that way, I think the hardest part for you all is the education aspect, because there is so much to unpack and not everybody's going to get what you're doing. And a lot of that is going to come through educating the brands, though. And I don't even think you have to always educate the consumers, because a lot of consumers aren't even going to know that you're there pulling strings, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't tell anybody. This would be the prime example of less is more. You try it. If you like it, that's all you need to know, and where you can buy it and how much it is. And then we're just going to keep going.
If the product speaks for itself, right, then everything else is easier, right? And that's why, we took it to these competitions early on, because we wanted validation that, don't take our word for it. In blind tastings, it does well.
Yeah, we all appreciate transparency, regardless of even if it's something as simple as sourced whiskey. Was it finished in this type of barrel? Yeah. But for every person that appreciates and would look to find it, on a back label or whatever literature mediums, and would appreciate the transparency, there's got to be 4 or 5 or 6 or how many ever don't care, ain't gonna read it, don't want to hear what you're trying to tell them. Let me taste it, and if I like it, I'll buy a bottle. All right, we're good, we're done. Don't waste my damn time. Those. I'm sure you encounter those kind of people quite often, and it's probably almost more counterproductive to try and explain anything other than just, oh, you like it? Sweet. It's this much. It's on aisle 3. Yep. Got big and little balls too.
Well,
get as many as you want.
Half the thing is people aren't even going to know. It might not even be the Bespoken Spirits bottle. You might be buying a bottle of a different brand, and it says distilled, produced by that brand, but it was really, Stu and Martin behind the scenes making it happen.
Remember that line about less is more, John? Sometimes you just let it ride.
Well, no,
say all you know.
No, we already talked about it, but
I know. I'm just saying, like, don't open that can of worms for people. Now they're going to have trouble sleeping at night or some shit.
Well, one question I have, and I know we've kept you guys on for a very long time because Zeke was late, and that's the type of guy he is. Like, that's how he shows his Southern hospitality to the good folks in San Francisco. He shows up late to the call. Is there application, because you talk about the data points and you talk about the 500 pieces of metadata that you're pulling from every single sample you have? Is there then an ability to expand? I know I'm like telling everything and you're like, shut up, because we're doing it. We don't want to tell everyone we're doing it. But is there consulting room to like go analyze people's distillate and then tell them what's working for them and what's not working for them? Oh, I see Martin's eyes. He's like, shut up. You
No, right? Because that's right. You can't, right? Today, what do you do, right? Unless you're one of the big guys, right? You cannot try 20 different distillates, right? And put them in a barrel and wait 5 years or 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, for whoever it is, right? And that's beautiful, right? That either we can help, right, distillers, right, to kind of down select what they like and how that will actually taste at the end of the day. So no, yeah, it's another great example.
Well,
things that you can do.
Well, I am thoroughly impressed. I can't wait to talk to you all again in a little bit of time and see what you've done and see when the case studies start coming out and you can not be under NDAs with people and tell us who you're actually doing things with. And then you put a bottle on the table and you're like, not only do we have our own stuff, which, as Zeke said, just shut up and drink it and you will be very impressed. But then you're like, also, hey, you know, this bottle that everybody said was the greatest thing next to sliced bread, you know, that was us too. So
hopefully we can do that in person, John.
I can't wait. Come on out to Nashville. We'll show you all a good time.
We'll look forward to that.
And Stu and Martin, where can everybody find Bespoken Spirits? I know there's some online retailers. There's also good stuff.
Yeah. So either go to our website, right? That's of course what you should do first, but should you not, and then you'll find a here to buy button. But I myself, when I look for a good bottle, I always go to winesearcher.com also, because that will give you maybe the retailers in your location, right? And as you know, we're not allowed to mention any particular retailer, right? But yeah, go to our website and or to wine. I don't even know. Yeah, I'm sure I can say let's go to winesearcher.com and type in Bespoken Spirits.
And are you all on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff?
Yeah. Please follow us. Yeah, good point. Thanks, John.
No problem. Stu, Martin, special shout out to Peter, who was babysitting us. I hope we didn't say anything that Peter didn't like. You all can find Zeke and I on Facebook at Dad's Drinking Bourbon, Twitter at Bourbon Dads, Instagram at Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Find us wherever you download your podcast. Chances are you already have, because you're listening to us right now. Please leave us an open and honest review, just like we leave open and honest reviews about the whiskey we drink. Zeke Baker, where else can the folks find us?
Go Nashville, Tennessee.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Thank you, guys. It was fun.